Hello, money actors. This is my first YouTube video since I moved to Texas, and I'm super excited to get back into it. But let's get right into the topic where how will billionaires pay their fair share end up costing you in the long run? Well, this is a topic all about really understanding how the money system works, because obviously rich people understand how the money system works. And there's a lot of misguided thoughts because the money system was created intentionally confusing so that the masses would just pay their taxes and be angry and not really understand why things are the way they are. The reason I'm doing this topic is because I see this posted on social media a lot, mostly from my industry friends who are super smart people, but they haven't gone through that process like I did, trying to figure out the money system. And so I thought the same way they did. Everybody needs to pay their fair share and stuff. Now, the difference is that I always thought government spending was out of control. Why aren't they getting this under control? So I always had that thought process. So maybe I wasn't always in line with my colleagues. Even if they make this a law where billionaires have to pay their quote unquote fair share, it's still going to end up costing you more in the long run. And the reason is because you have an income and rich people don't. And you're like, how is that possible? Elon Musk is worth like, $250 billion or whatever the number is. And how can that be? Well, rich people use debt to create wealth. And so you can't tax a loan. So for instance, if you borrow money to buy a car, they're not going to tax you on that money that you borrowed to pay for that car because it's borrowed money. You can't tax a loan. And that's what rich people do, is they borrow money using good debt. So there's a difference between good debt and bad debt. They borrow money to buy assets, where we as a group of middle-class people borrow money as bad debt to buy liabilities like cars, or the house that you live in, running up credit card debt for other crap you probably don't need. So that's how we do it. But the rich borrow money to buy assets, and those assets create income, and that income doesn't go directly to them. It goes to their businesses, and their businesses pay for the things that they need. And then when the income exceeds or gets to a certain point where they're going to start getting taxed on it, they borrow even more money and buy another asset to then bring in more income, and so on and so on. So their wealth gets bigger and bigger, but that's how they don't get taxed. And we're going to go through what they're proposing now to tax wealth. But before I do, let's look in the past when this has happened before. So in the past, in fact, Wizard of Oz was written, a book written in the late 1800s, during the previous populist movement. So there was something that happened just like today, where there was this populist rising against the elite, and it was misguided. Link below to a video I did on the Wizard of Oz and how it was about the money system back in that previous populist movement in the 1800s. But that ultimately led to 1913, where people voted themselves a centralized bank in the Federal Reserve, the Fed, and 1 year later voted themselves an income tax that was only supposed to be targeted on the super rich. And of course, the super rich never paid that income tax because they don't make income. They borrow money for assets, like I just mentioned. And so this now is the camel's nose under the tent, where the government now has legal authority to tax income. And years go by where this is law, where you can now tax income. And it started out as a small tax and once the government gets a tax on you, they never pull it back. And it just got more and more and more. So it was like a 1% tax on the middle class, then a little bit more, then a little bit more. And even during these times, the rich were supposed to pay, they had like a 90% income tax, but they never paid it, because they don't make income again. So they always get around it, but you are now left with 35, 40% maybe in some cases income tax. And on top of that, you're paying your sales tax and blah, 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 all the other tax. And of course, the inflation tax we're all paying now. That's the hidden tax that pay for their government spending. And so my whole point to this discussion is we need to reverse our thinking and not be thinking about they need to pay their fair share. No, we need to stop them spending so much money for no reason. Why are we paying $200 billion for a war in Ukraine that we actually provoked? I know that's controversial to say, but sorry, that would have never happened if somebody actually sat and negotiated. In fact, Zelensky had a deal with the Russians where they would have never been invaded, and Biden had Boris Johnson go in and basically have Zelensky tear up that deal. And you can go look even further back where this was provoked starting in 2014, and all of NATO that's been encroaching on Russia that we promised would never happen back with Reagan and Gorbachev. So all these false promises, but ultimately we are paying $200 billion where that could have stayed in our pockets. And of course, it's not staying in our pockets because our government's just running up more debt, which causes inflation, which causes a hidden tax on all of us. So wars, welfare, corporate welfare, which is a massive problem. That's the real problem, not billionaires, because they'll never pay a tax. So now that gets me to the next point where now politicians are saying, well, we're going to charge a wealth tax. So this is just going to happen the same way what happened to the income tax is it's going to be supposedly for the uber rich, but it's going to end up happening to you and me. So let's go through that thought experiment. So let's say they actually charge a wealth tax, which means unrealized capital gains, which means you haven't sold your stock, you haven't sold your house, but now you're going to get charged for whatever it's supposedly worth at the time. So the theory is these billionaires have all of these huge assets that are worth huge amounts of money, and they're going to have to pay unrealized gains. So their thought process is like Elon Musk started a company from nothing, and now it's worth, $1 trillion or whatever it is, and now he's got to pay a tax on that $1 trillion. Well, first of all, the billionaires will figure out a way, because they have so much money, get through whatever loophole it is to not pay this tax. And right now what it is why you see this mass exodus from California to Texas or Florida, because these rich people like Elon Musk are getting out of the way before these wealth taxes come in. And that leaves all of the remaining people to pay their fair share. And so if they actually, let's just say they actually pass this law. Well, most of the billionaires have gotten out, but now you have to look at yourself, because 15 years will go by, nobody will actually have paid that tax, no rich person. And now California's tapped. They're already billions in debt. 40 billion, I think it was. No, 70 billion, I think is the last number I saw. 70 billion in debt. And let's say another 10 years goes by. How much more in debt are they going to be? I just saw a thing where they're going to pay millions of dollars out to undocumented people, not citizens, illegal immigrants. They're going to give them a down payment to buy a house and then make those payments for them with productive people, taxpayer money. So just go 10 years down the road, California is going to be flat broke. They're going to need a new tax. And what are they going to do? Oh, we've already enacted a wealth tax 10 years ago. Didn't seem to do any good since there's no rich people left. So we're going to go after you. You, middle America, that paid, let's pretend you actually got a house for $200,000. Now it's worth $2 million. And now you have to pay that spread because that's a capital gain of $1.8 million. Or let's say you bought an Apple stock years ago. Whatever those gains that you made on that Apple stock, you now owe that spread. Or all the other assets that you have in your 401k, whatever it may be, you now owe tax on that. And how you're going to pay that is now you're going to have to sell all of those assets just to pay the tax, which is just ridiculous. So we can all see where that's gonna go. But anyway, I wanted to just kind of run this by people because people just don't think this thing through. It's just like, yeah, tax the wealthy. No, you have to stop and think. The problem is government spending. So what is the answer for yourself? Well, the first answer is to like and subscribe this video. That way you'll get new videos as they come to learn a little bit more about money each time I post a video. I've got a lot that you can go back and look at. You can also go to the link below to get my free ebook of Behind the Scenes of an Early Retirement, which helps you learn a little bit more, get a little bit more of a grasp in a fun, unique way, where I pair movies and money. And lastly, to put pressure on the government not to tax billionaires, but to stop blowing money. You can go after the Federal Reserve, which was enacted over 100 years ago, which has worked its way of printing endless money out of nothing and stealing Americans' wealth. And the world's wealth, actually. It's not just Americans. And go back to a gold standard, which Nixon took us off in 1971. That's not going to save everything, of course, but having gold as an anchor on government spending is a huge win. That's how you're going to do it. Anyway, like and subscribe the video, and I'll see you next time.